Yeah, it looks like you.
We're up?
I think we're up.
Okay. We are live.
Yeah,
Welcome.
It looks like you. We're up. I think we're up. Hold on. So how do I do that? I gotta turn off the sound on.
You go to...
I see it.
That's just on that one website. The YouTube. Yeah, okay. Welcome to Mount Shasta, California, land of smoke and ash. We thought it was ash land just over the hill, but it's not. It's here. Of course, we do live at the base of a volcano, so smoke should not be that much of a surprise. Wow. We have a lot to talk about, so we might be here all night, everyone. The first thing I want to do is provide an update for those of you outside the area, in distant lands like Redding, of everything that has transpired in the last 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, we met, we had a broadcast, it went very well. Last week was a holiday. It was Labor Day in celebration of the working folks in America who keep this place running. That was last Monday, a week ago, or 2 weeks ago today. And then the following Wednesday, which was the 5th of September, I was driving to Redding and came upon a fire beside the freeway. And it was very large, kind of like whole pine trees fully involved. There was a fence fully involved. And I snapped a couple pictures outside the window, first of the smoke plumes, and then I got one with flames. And immediately started trying to call 911. I didn't see any fire trucks, engine that wasn't being worked. There's no sign of anybody around. I'm saying, kind of like, well, this isn't right. What the heck? So there was no cell signal there. About 2 miles down the road, I got a cell signal and got a hold of 911, and they apparently did not know about it. I was apparently the first person to call and say, yo, exit 707, right by the off-ramp, there's a fire. And by the time I got to Redding, which is about a half hour away, I was going down to run errands. I had a meeting scheduled that night, and you could see a very large mushroom cloud off in the distance, and that's 30 miles at that point. And I'm thinking, that was right by the freeway. If it's that bad, I'll bet the freeway's closed. And after I ran my errands, I was eating lunch at a little place in a shopping center, and just so happens in the shopping center, there was a fire crew. You know, the way the CAL FIRE, forest fire trucks work here, they go in groups of, they POG. They've got, usually it's a group of 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 4. This one I think was 5. And I said, and I saw them putting on, they'd obviously been there eating lunch someplace. I don't think at the same restaurant I was at, but in the same center. And then I saw all the people outside the trucks getting suited up. And I go, they're going where I just came from. So I walked over and said, hey, what do you know about the road? And it's like, we don't know, but we think it's closed by now. And that thing really blew up, so stay away. So I gave up the rest of my errands. I gave up my meeting, and I turned and left. And there's an alternate route to get here. But it's when that I-5 corridor closes between Redding and Mount Shasta, it literally is one of those things you can't get there from here. You have to go somewhere else first. In this case, the somewhere else is a ghost town called Boerne. I say ghost town because at least a third, if not half, the storefronts in there are absolutely vacant. Nothing there. There's a few pockets around Boerne that has activity, but the rest of it's just, you know. Anyway, instead of 60 miles home, it was 140 miles home, and instead of 1 hour, it took me 3 because it was very heavily traveled. But I got home. And we had no idea how fast that fire was going to move, how what direction it was going to go. So I needed to get home in case we had to bug out. So that exit 707 I mentioned is for a place called Volmers Delta. And this is now called the Delta Fire. It's internationally famous already. And it has had Interstate 5 closed. And up and down the west coast of the U.S., it's either Interstate 5 or nothing, pretty much. You're on farm roads otherwise. And so for 5 days, the west coast was closed, unless you wanted to fly. That has disrupted a lot of communities, and I wanted to talk about it because of, for several reasons pertaining to your spiritual work. One is, we are in, you've heard me say this before, we are in the end times. The Hopi predicted it, the other Native American tribes have predicted it, the Bible predicts it, the Australian Aborigines have predicted it. Pretty much every culture on the planet that we have either a verbal record or a written record from says, oh yeah, there's going to come a time when everything turns to chaos and goes to heck in a handbasket, and it's a time of change for humanity and the earth, and when we get through that time of change, we're going to have 1,000 years of a golden age. So first of all, that stuff's been told to us for many thousands of years. Nobody should be surprised by this. And any of you who are watching this should not be surprised by this. And I don't want any of you to freak out by this. The Boy Scout motto is what you need to focus on. Which is?
I was never a Boy Scout.
But that's not a point. Did you date Boy Scouts?
No.
Oh, you missed out. Because Boy Scouts, for the most part, are geeks and nerds. And if you ask a Boy Scout out, they are so appreciative of any attention. They would be the best, most loyal boyfriend you could have ever had. I kid you not. I speak from personal experience on this. Be prepared is the Boy Scout motto. Back in the days when Boy Scouts were boys, and they trained you to be men. And they trained you to do things like build fire and find food in the forest and put up a tent when you don't have one with you. You have to make it out of tree branches. And I learned a lot at Boy Scout camp when I went. I would much rather have been to Girl Scout camp because I was one of those geeks and nerds who couldn't get dates during the time frame I was in Boy Scouts. So I really wanted to go to Girl Scout camp, but they wouldn't let me. So we have done a lot. We, my lovely bride, click the cameras and smile and wave at the audience. Could you please, lovely bride, smile and wave? This is my lovely bride.
It's like the Queen.
Okay, now you can come back to me.
Okay, that's enough. She's getting too into it.
Right. You know, I'm the same astrological sign as the Queen of England.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She's a Taurus Tiger too.
Oh, that's bad.
Just
You didn't tell me that before we married. You said you were a Taurus Tiger. You didn't say the Queen of England was. Oh. You wouldn't know.
We can get a no over that.
we have our deal breakers.
Yeah, well, if she'd been English, that would have been a deal breaker. But we've got proof. She, too, is Scottish and Viking. And some other Celtic blood thrown in just for fun. Where was I? What was I talking about? Being prepared?
Yes.
Yeah, we thought we were prepared. we've been doing this preparation stuff for years. And we said, oh, well, we probably need just one or two more things, and we need to get a little bin to put them in. But yeah, we're good. Until about a month ago, or a little more, we had the car fire, the big Redding fire, and we started thinking, that thing's moving to the north awfully fast. And it did. It went 30 miles to the north before they got it under control. And then right after that, across the freeway was the HIRZ fire, H-I-R-Z, and not H-E-R-S. And that one started up right about the time the car fire was dying down. And it started where the car fire ended, and it started moving north rapidly. And we're like, this is not good. We might have to bug out. And so just about the time they have the HIRZ fire under control, it was about 85–90% at the time. It's now 100%, by the way. Car fire, 100%, it's out. The HIRZ fire, 100%, it's out. So for those of you watching a long ways away, those two are out. And then this Delta fire blows up, and I'm following it a little closer than most. A, because it's closer to us, and B, because I'm the one who spotted it. And it's like there's a personal connection there. It's like, what's up with this? Why are many dozens of people driving by this thing and nobody's picking up a phone and calling 911? It had been going for a while because I could see the smoke many miles away as I'm like 3, 4. Is that smoke? Yeah, that's smoke. Around another corner. Wow, that's a lot of smoke. Wow, that's not the HIRZ fire, which is 5 miles that way. That's right here. And it was literally right there. So we weren't as prepared. When we started packing up, well, we want to take this, and we had our list, and it's like, no, we weren't ready. We were not prepared. So we did the Boy Scout thing. We got prepared. And so this was a good impetus for us. And that's where the power is. You have to be prepared for not what happens when things go right. We have to be prepared for what happens when things go wrong. So all this shamanic training we do, we learn to travel in other planes. We have to be comfortable when and I love this quote by Coyote, when we walk into the room and realize there's no floor there. You have to be okay with that, with absolutely no frame of reference, and you have to hold your intent and put your attention on what you're doing and do it, right? So that's what shamanic training is supposed to be doing for us all. And so get real about the fact that things can happen, and that should not shake you. It shouldn't. You should not allow it to shake you. You should say, I have an intent. I'm going to use my attention. I'm going to turn on the Akadwa, and I'm going to focus and do what needs to be done. And yes, you're packing. We went through. We other than loading the last 4 or 5 bins we put together into the bed of the pickup and actually getting all our animals in the trailer and driving away, we're ready to go. But while you're doing all that work, you can't ignore your personal practice. You're supposed to be meditating. You're supposed to be journaling. You're supposed to be recording your dreams. You're supposed to be working with attention and an intent. And that is the kind of habits that you need to develop. There will come a time.
Can you move your chair up? He's stuck. I'm sorry.
He's stuck. Well,
He's stuck behind the chair.
Help him get out, introduce him to the audience, and then he needs to go somewhere else.
okay, sit.
He needs to come in front a little bit.
Come on, we're here.
Can you say hi, big dog?
Say hi. Yeah, look over that way.
Oh,
This is our wild beast spirit. He's nice until you try to hurt one of us or one of our chickens, and then he'll take your finger off. Not that he's ever done that to someone before, but don't attack our chickens. That's the lesson. Because Spirit likes our little chickens, and he protects them. Okay, call him over there, Vaughn.
He's a 110-pound lap dog.
He thinks he's a lap dog, but he's a 110-pound off-white German Shepherd. That's a specific breed. There are those who would call it a white German Shepherd, but not when they live on a farm. Be prepared. And then keep yourself informed. One of the things I talk about is the concept of a radar screen. In the world of engineering and technology, that allows you to see what's going a long ways away. You can see things coming towards you, crossing your field of view. Used to be radar had a range of about 10 miles. Now it's hundreds and hundreds of miles. And we pick up what's going on. So that information gets displayed on a screen. It's like a cathode ray tube. And for those of you who aren't engineers, that means like a television screen. And we call it a radar screen. And it shows that little line going around, and when the enemy aircraft flies into your zone, you go blip, blip, and you see it, and you can track it. And you can tell your interceptors that'll go this way, go that way. Pay attention to what comes up on your radar screen. So in the case of these fires, for everybody who's living in fire country, whether it's Northern California or Utah or Nevada or Southern California or Riverside or any place that has had fires in the not too distant past, you need to be aware, stay informed. Find the CAL FIRE sites if it's in California, and there's a couple of good ones. You can email one of us and we'll give you the link if you've never done this before. And it has an infrared map made by a satellite. There's a satellite that passes over this region 3 or 4 times a day, and it takes an infrared picture and it maps the heat, and it shows up on a blip on a map of California, and you can zoom in, and it's very high tech, and it's within a few hours old, and it helps you track it. And so we were just about ready to start loading things seriously to get ready to drive away, and the wind shifted and the fire turned and it's gone in a different direction, and then it's blown back on itself, and so now it's just kind of hovering in this one area, and it's kind of staying there, and they're getting a handle on it. So be aware. Yeah. Question.
On my Facebook site, I just posted a link to the incidents page, but it's the general view, and what is of particular interest is the fact that there's a red flag warning all the way from Mount Shasta past Salt Lake City and on to Wyoming, which means every state in between, every county in between is under warning right now for conditions for fire. And when you look at that zoomed out view of the western U.S., there's hardly a place on it that's not on fire right now.
Yeah, and we're not alone in the U.S. Alaska, well, that's U.S. I mean, British Columbia in particular has been hit hard this summer. A lot of smoke. They've even been able to track it with other satellites, that some of the smoke that's been bothering us here in Mount Shasta, we know, has come from British Columbia. They follow the plumes down. So, and that's a long ways away. 100 plus 300 plus 200 is more than 600 miles away. We're getting smoke. That would be like this Mount Shasta fire smoke going all the way down to Riverside. So be prepared. Look at that radar screen and pay attention to what it tells you. And the stress will be a lot less. Yeah, it's depressing. You're surrounded by smoke. It's a little disorienting. It bothers your lungs. The lungs can be helped a lot by masks, like you're a painter. The disorientation, just ignore it. Learn to be okay with it. It's good practice for what comes later. And by later, I mean when we enter the Bardos, because our human biological machine finally ran out of gas. And this is all good training for that. And if the prophecies are right, things could very easily get worse before they get better. How bad it gets, how fast it recovers, depends on what we do now. That's kind of what the Hopi said. And that means be awake, be aware. Don't drink the Kool-Aid that the mainstream media and the mainstream politicians are trying to get you to drink.
Don't watch Fox News.
Well, no, I disagree with your statement. Where you said Fox News,
Yeah, any news.
it's put the word television. Don't watch television. There's a lot of, and this is a great segue into what I want to talk about next. There is a great deal of effort being placed on left versus right. And the polarization of society is becoming more extreme. Back when I grew up in the last millennium, most everybody was kind of a centrist. You know, we respected everybody's rights and freedoms. We did this, and there was a few radicals out on the fringes. Hang on. Oh. They have to wait. Out on the, somebody's calling me, and I wanted it on vibrate so I could hear it in case it was somebody trying to come over here tonight, but this is not. So you get a few radical fringes on the left, and you get a few radical fringes on the right, and the vast majority of society, we kind of looked at both directions and said, they're all nuts. It didn't matter what the issue was. You're always going to have the tail of the bell curve, and those people are nuts. It's. Do you disagree?
No, it's just funny how you put it. I mean, it's real, but it's funny.
And by nuts, let's be clear. I would contend that, you know, thinking back to the last millennium, that those people way out there on the far left and the far right, I would say they all had diagnosable mental illnesses. So when I say nuts, I'm not just saying that as a euphemism. Well, society is starting to polarize. What was a nice big bell curve in the middle with a few nut jobs on either end of the spectrum, we're starting to see more and more and more of the people moving from the middle towards one extreme or another. Society is polarizing. And this has been deliberately planned. If you find yourself polarizing on any issue, you are a victim of social engineering. Up to a point. If you find yourself polarizing on any issue that you have not personally researched all the facts on, then there's a high degree of probability that you've been socially engineered to believe this or that or the other thing. Whether it's Nike shoes and Colin Kaepernick, or Levi's and the gun issue. So let's burn Levi's, let's burn Nikes. You will notice that what the mainstream media emphasizes aren't the real issues. Let's take this Kaepernick NFL issue as a case study. Anyone know how it started? Do we have anyone online, by the way? I forgot to ask that.
Cherie and Maria and Melody are online.
Hello.
Hello, Cherie. Hello, Maria. Hello, Melody. The issue began in the NFL the San Francisco 49ers benched their quarterback in favor of Kaepernick, who was a quarterback, because they thought, oh, he's the up-and-comer, and he's a better athlete, so we're going with the young guy, and we're throwing the old guy under the bus. Well, Kaepernick turned out to be a flash in the pan. He had half a dozen good games. They went fairly far in the playoffs, but then that was it. He was done. He was washed up. He got benched. And after he was benched, he decided that, and I think there's some legitimacy to his intent. His intent is to promote racial problems in this country, of which we have many. His intent was specifically to talk about the lack of justice in our criminal justice system with respect to Black Americans, and especially issues like police brutality, like inconsistently applied laws and criminal sentencing, and police brutality, police murders under the color of authority, very few of which get prosecuted and convicted, by the way. So there's a real issue there that he was trying to bring attention to. And the way he did it was, rather than standing with his hand on his heart during the national anthem at football games, he took a knee. He kneeled down and said, I'm not standing and saluting a flag of a country that will do this. And that was his issue. And it became a hot button issue for most Americans. Most Americans are either adamantly in favor of this protest or they're adamantly against it. Fast forward a couple years, many players in the NFL are doing this, despite the fact that the NFL, as a private, and I say that loosely, I'll tell you why in a bit, agency, they have the right to require their employees to do things like stand at attention during the national anthem. And they didn't punish anybody for this. So this has gone on for a couple years now, and more players are following suit. After the last year he was in the league, Kaepernick got cut, and he hasn't had a job in the NFL since. He just recently signed a contract with Nike to promote their products, including shoes, and this larger issue of social justice. On the surface, okay, that seems good. Except now people are upset at Nike. They think that the protests disrespect the flag, they disrespect all American veterans who have died to keep our country free, it's disrespecting to our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, and they think that that shouldn't be the protest. I don't know what the protest should be, but it shouldn't be that, according to one camp out here on the right. And out here on the left is, look at all these police murders of Black people. And it's not just Black people, there's white people too. I read a case yesterday, another case today, of white women being murdered by police. The latest atrocity I saw was a white female police officer entered the wrong apartment thinking it was her own and found a man in her apartment that happened to be Black, and she immediately shot and killed him without finding out what was going on. Turns out, A, it wasn't her apartment, and B, it was even the wrong building in her complex. She's now been arrested on charges of manslaughter, which she should be, unless it turns out that it was premeditated and he was targeted in some way, which we don't know yet. The investigation is still ongoing. That's the kind of thing that's been happening, is murders and beatings, etc., at the hands of police, and the police of all races, against mostly minority Americans. So yet another piece in this polarization of society on this one issue is the fact that Nike makes most of its products in China, and all of the employees there are working basically under slave labor conditions, either 20 cents an hour or less. And if you mess up, you get docked your 20 cents for that day. So Nike is now leading a protest against injustice and inequality by selling products made with basically slave labor. So now there were already reasons to boycott Nike, but now the people on the right are boycotting them even further, and the people on the left are running out and buying more Nikes, and other people are burning their Nikes. And it has become a vast polarizing issue. And when you look at what goes on in the media, most of the reports are talking about Copernic and Nike and burning shoes, and that's and the Pledge of Allegiance, or not the Pledge of Allegiance, the national anthem and the flag, and is this respecting it? You have military people coming out, this is horrible, you're disrespecting what we've done for this country, my father died in combat, etc. You have other military people saying, no, we're fighting for freedom and the right to protest, which we have that right in this country. So you've got a lot of confusion going on. But at least 3 stories out of 4 talk about the polarization and the division, and they're not talking about the regional core issue of the police and criminal justice system's inequality towards Black Americans in particular. It happens to Asians, it happens to Hispanics, it even happens sometimes to whites, but the vast majority of the atrocities, purely by coincidence, seem to be committed against people whose skin happens to be black. That's a reality our country isn't dealing with right now. And I don't care if you buy Nikes or not. That's not the issue. I personally would not, simply because of their slave labor practices, and it would have nothing to do with this Colin Kaepernick issue. But then the next factor is the NFL has a lot of power. This is something I alluded to a little bit ago. In our society, the NFL is a de facto branch of the government. And I say that because of the fact that the NFL, even though they're a private company in theory, they are not required to pay income tax. They have been declared a nonprofit by virtue of the fact that they provide a social service of some kind, which translates to a very Orwellian reality that they're keeping the masses entertained and distracting them from the real issues of governmental corruption and things of that nature, the loss of our rights and freedoms.
Like gladiator fights.
Yeah, it is exactly like the Roman gladiator situation. Every year you need a bigger and bigger, more outrageous circus than last year, because the masses have already seen people fighting. So now it's people versus lions, and
the gorier the better.
The gorier the better. So to a certain extent, this whole national anthem fiasco is a way of doing that without actually giving all the NFL players a sword and letting go out on the field and kill each other and then score the touchdown. We're arguing about the national anthem. I remember a skit on Saturday Night Live way back in the 70s, where it showed everybody gearing up for a football championship game, and they use real footage, and it's like, we have the coin toss, and this team wins the coin toss, and then it cut to the end of the game, which had actually gone into overtime, and the team that won the coin toss won the game in overtime. So of course everybody charges the field, so they're all suited up in their armor, right? But the only game is the coin toss, right? And so that's SNL's. It's all for show, right? So they've turned the national anthem now into part of the show. The NFL has had a rule in its books, which they could have forced if they wanted to, which says every player will be lined up on the sideline holding the helmet in their hand, standing respectfully at attention during the national anthem. Why, you might wonder, would there be a rule in the NFL's books for that? You guys know.
You mentioned earlier about just the fact that they have these, they have to have certain contracts with their employees to
Well,
do certain things, but
every company you'll work for, from the littlest mom and pop shop to the biggest Fortune 500 corporation, will have a rule book for its employees, and that's in the NFL rule book, right? So why?
Sure.
Almost. It's partially correct. Where did the rule come from? Did the NFL just think one day, let's put a rule in there and make everybody stand at attention while we do the national anthem?
it's an all-American thing to do. I mean, all of our sports open and close with prayers
something, yeah.
and
Except in this case, the NFL does it because the Department of Defense pays them to.
Wow.
The DoD, I can't remember how many millions a year or how many millions for each game. The DoD is paying the NFL to do that. To have the national anthem at the start of every football game.
So much for separation of state.
Yeah, so that's why I contend the NFL is not a private agency. It's a branch of the government. In which case, the rules that a private organization can require whatever it wants of its employees, and by agreeing to be an employee there, you agree to those rules, it renders those rules null and void because now it's public. And in public in this country, you get to do whatever you want. You don't want to have to stand up. I mean, this was a Supreme Court decision, gosh, way back last century. No, I think it was last millennium. It was back in like the 80s or maybe even the 70s that somebody in a school, it was a public school situation, objected to having to stand and salute the flag.
Mm-hmm.
It went to the Supreme Court. They said, no, you can't force anybody to do that. That was the Pledge of Allegiance, not the national anthem. But it's the same principle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's already been decided. That's already gone to the Supreme Court. So this conversation, this whole 2-year-long fiasco that's been going on about players standing or players kneeling is a moot point. The Supreme Court already decided it. Oh, you let that bug get away. That's our other cat. Come here, Smokey. Come here. Come here.
Nina's not here.
She's locked in the bedroom. She was sleeping on the bed when I put Pogo in there. So she won't be here tonight. That's probably why Smokey's in here tonight. So this has already been decided. All the NFL Players Association had to do, which is the union for NFL players, was say, get one of their lawyers to write the letter that says, according to this decision of the Supreme Court, we don't have to do any of this BS. And what you're requiring is unconstitutional. Here's the Supreme Court decision. End of subject. We will kneel if we want. It's already a done deal. But it has been allowed by both sides and propagated and spun up, and it's being used to divide our culture. When I say read between the lines and don't accept the premise of the question, this is some of what I'm talking about. And then there's yet another layer to this whole issue, as if that wasn't enough. This reached a peak, this furor all during this last season, so a year ago. So I guess I don't follow, but apparently the NFL season started this last weekend. Yeah, I saw something about the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears go through my feed, and apparently Green Bay won. So that's how I figured out that thing. But I don't go look at the sports channel.
To kneel or not to kneel?
Yeah. So last year it reached a peak. During the off season, the NFL rule makers got together and the owners said, here's our new policy. You have to stand and you'll be fired, basically, or if you don't. First you get fined and then you got fired or something like that.
That's because of
But
the president.
you aren't required to be on the field during the national anthem. They were giving players an out, which was like, well, they don't have to be there, but then that doesn't give them the opportunity to protest publicly and visibly.
And that still doesn't really address the original rule was that
No.
you had to be standing there at attention.
Right. Right. So it was a lame, weak attempt on the part of the league to deal with the issue and hope it well. They've been trying really hard at first to sweep it under the rug, and now it's kind of blown up, right? So once the season ended, when the Super Bowl happened, I guess that's in January or thereabouts, late January.
Mhm.
How many protests were there over the summer? Over the rest of the winter and the spring and into the summer? None. None of these NFL players who supposedly care about this issue did anything publicly about keeping this protest going. Police brutality has been continued rampant. I follow 2 or 3 Facebook pages. One of them, I remember the exact name, is called Policing the Police. And every day it's full of new reports of police brutality caught on film. There's another one that's filming the police or photographing the police or something like that. And the Supreme Court has already ruled that it's okay for the public to film the police. And there was one that just went through of police swearing and beating and arresting someone who was filming them, which is blatantly against the law. And eventually, the courts will turn. Probably nothing will happen to that officer, and there'll be a lawsuit, and public tax dollars will be used to pay off the victim, and nothing happens to the police. But the NFL players have a lot of power. They could be out there all year long. They could be out there during the season, on weekdays, not just on Sunday for the national anthem, protesting, leading America. They could be out there and they could shut down the entire league. This weekend, when it's time to play the games, what they could do is everybody line up, stand there or kneel for the national anthem, and when that's done, instead of playing the game, they walk off the field and say, up yours very much. You'll get your football when we see significant changes in the criminal justice system in the U.S. What that would probably result in is every NFL player getting fired. And they would bring in weak, lame substitutes who were the ones who couldn't make it the first round. And probably none of them would be willing to play. So basically, football would be gone, pro football. And if they really wanted to make a protest and affect it, then get everybody's attention, that's what they should do. If it were me, I would say, stand there at attention, be respectful of the flag, be respectful of the values our Constitution is supposed to be instilling and supporting in this country, and then walk off the field and say, no, we're done. No more football. We want change. So you can see how much that one issue has created division and polarity in our society. Everybody's getting polarized. Nobody wants to be a centrist anymore. There are very few. And nobody wants to talk all sides of this issue. As soon as you object to something put forth by those on the radical left, they call you a racist or a homophobe, and that's the end of the discussion. They don't want a discussion. And as soon as you object to somebody's opinion on the right, they're calling you a communist or a socialist or un-American, and they don't want to deal with the facts.
Oh, get out of here. You don't really believe that, do you?
That's old verbiage.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Good old boys.
Good old boy, yeah. So, in terms of doing this higher spiritual work, is learn to read between the lines. Learn to see the whole chessboard. It's another analogy I like. And always assume there's another reason they're not telling you. Because I've rattled off just half a dozen issues on this one issue that aren't being fully discussed. I occasionally find a little website here, a little report there, and I've pieced this together over the last 2 years because my first response was kind of WTF. You know? What the fiddlesticks? And when I looked into, because I've been following this police brutality thing for a while too. You know, I've had people tell me, oh, you shouldn't be that. We know some police officers. And my friend is a police officer. Oh, that. And it's like, you know what? If they're offended at the truth that there are radical police officers out there, they call it the thin blue line, right? Everybody stands together, right? For every bad cop out there, every one of those reports on these websites of police brutality, police murder, one of the horrifying ones is they arrested a woman for unpaid parking tickets. The woman happens to have been a heroin addict, which probably explains why her tickets were unpaid. But it's a medical condition that if she doesn't either get heroin or get one of the methadone, that she can go into seizures and die.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? That's what happened. She was in custody in a cell complaining for a day and a half. You've got to help me. She went into convulsions. They had a film of this. She went into convulsions. She died on the floor. It was 6 hours before from the time on the film she stopped moving, before anyone checked on her, and nobody attempted a resuscitation. Why then it was too late, but it didn't matter, right? Because they didn't know how long it'd been.
What state?
Difference doesn't make it. Happens everywhere.
I don't remember which state. It was, I think, the Midwest someplace. But it wasn't exactly. No, I think that one was Nevada. That was Nevada. And I could be real safe and say it was east of here. Because the only thing west of here is basically Alaska and Hawaii. And I know it wasn't one of those.
West of here?
Yes.
What's above Eureka?
Well, yeah, but Oregon and California at this point, we're pretty much equal, right?
You're talking about the whole state.
The whole country, yeah. So it was one of those eastern states, like Nevada. It's a serious issue, but there's every day there's 1 to 2 dozen major new incidences I could post. I post 1 or 2 a week of the most egregious examples. And I wish every law enforcement officer in this country was required to look through there every day and see, here's what officers are doing. And then when you compare the training officers get here to the training they get in other countries, here it's 6 months or less. And then they're given a gun and a badge to go out there and catch bad guys. Other countries, to be a police officer is 2 to 3 years training before you're given the gun and the badge and put out on the street. Other countries have much, much lower rates of police brutality or police killing or shooting anybody. It's like the US has more than the rest of the world put together, with the possible exception of mainland China. I mean, we're worse now than the Soviet Union was back in the day. We have as many armed police officers as we have a standing army. And they have the same equipment now. They've got flak vests, they've got tanks, they've got machine guns for police officers, traffic cops. You can't allow any of that to affect your center, your calm, your place of power. You clock it, you observe it. If there's an issue that you feel passionate about, the first thing to do is make sure you research it very thoroughly so that you know all sides of the issue. And then find, if you realize that, yeah, it's really as bad as I think it is, then get involved and work proactively to make a change. This is one of the failings of the NFL players. They're saying they want change, but they're not being specific. They need to have a laundry list. I want this change, this change, this change, this change. Work for those specific changes.
Kind of sounds like the Occupy movement, you know, that came and went so quick. You know, they had a potential of making a difference, and yet there was no real agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't accomplish anything.
No, the Occupy, on the surface, what you said is 100% correct, except for one thing. The Occupy movement was not about the public rising up. The Occupy movement was choreographed by the same people paid off by George Soros to create dissent. It was a test case. The Occupy movement was, okay, how passionate are people about this issue? How easy can we get them sucked in and do this? Occupy Wall Street, I think, was the first one. Go there. It's like, okay, we're all here. Now what? No, we're all here. There was no now what. There was never intended to be a now what. A lot of people, you know, just like that old movie Network, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, but I don't know what I want you to do instead. Right? And then they had a big Occupy thing in Seattle. They had several all over the country for different purposes. And then it sort of failed away. And the reason it trickled away and faded away is George Soros stopped paying the money for it. This was a year ago, or maybe a little more. There was a big protest back east, down south, in one of the Carolinas, Georgia, someplace back there, where there was a white supremacist group and the anti-fascist group, Carolinas, and they had this big protest and a big fight and all these arrests, all this conflict, right?
Somebody died.
Somebody died. Soros paid for both sides. This is exactly what the U.S. government is doing with the terrorists that we're fighting. We fund Al Qaeda and then we stop, and then we fund ISIS and then we stop, and then if you want to know the playbook the government is using, seriously, go read George Orwell's novel 1984. There is an intent to have continuous turmoil and continuous war. And that's what we're seeing. And, oh, we ran out of that enemy because the military was too efficient. Well, let's create a new enemy.
Football players.
Well, there's that, but then first it was Osama bin Laden, right? And then it was Al Qaeda. And now it's ISIS. And now it's Syria. And wait, now we're on the same side as ISIS in Syria, and now we're funding Al Qaeda, and
Russia.
yeah, we're doing all this. Russia's our friend. Russia's our enemy. Russia's our friend. Russia's our enemy. It's like the more they investigate Trump and Russia, the more they find Hillary's fingerprints all over everything, right? Oh, let's stop investigating Russia. Now oh, look, Chinese, Syria, bombs, right? You got to see past that. You got to recognize for what it is, and what should our focus be at a time like this?
The bigger vision.
Yes,
Or
that
free
is
will.
exactly right. What is the vision we would like to create instead? What does the world look like when we pull away the veil of artificiality? When we pull back the curtain and they're telling us, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Well, that's where we need to pay attention. Right? Right out of the Wizard of Oz. The answer is there. Just don't pay attention to what's up on the screen with the big head and the shooting smoke and all of that. And they're, oh.
45 even said that. Don't believe what you see and don't believe what you hear, because that's not what's happening.
Right. And that goes layers and layers and layers, and some of it I can talk about, and some of it I'm not ready to, some of it I'm not qualified to, but there is a lot that I am. And I'm telling you how to approach these issues, how to really analyze it. And the key is, what do we want to do instead? What does the world look like when we're not being lied to and we want to create something else? What's the something else? Think about it. We've already actually started doing that with these upgrade your consciousness meditations. We started for the weather, and now it kind of expanded to include the message into the human collective consciousness of God lives. Love is the answer. We are all one. Okay. And then the next modification was send that to Mount Shasta and connect that to the grid of the holy mountains all over the world. And it's very quickly spreading beyond those into the whole Earth grid, by the way. It's going well. Or to the trees. I'm doing the trees a little less right now, personally, but if you're doing it, keep it up. It's good. I have been informed by dwellers on the unseen plane that this work is very good, it's starting to be very effective, and it's very much appreciated.
Aww.
I've done a couple specific meditations on this now, and keep it up is the message.
That's really special that they let you know.
Yeah. Our work has not gone unnoticed, so do more. That's how we're going to change the world. Is we're going to be sending these messages into the human collective consciousness. And by using the Akatwa, it's much more powerful than people who don't hold the Akatwa, which is a major reason to get the Akatwa. As far as I'm concerned, everyone needs to get the Akatwa, provided they're willing to take the oath. There's people I wouldn't give it to. Some of them are on the evening news. Some of them are not, but there's whole organizations out there I wouldn't trust with the Akatwa. Whole large groups of people. That oath has to be taken seriously. And if you're ever in a position of giving an Akatwa transmission to someone and they won't take it seriously, don't give it. Otherwise, the karma comes back on you. Make sure that you know that they're serious. But that's one of the messages I wanted to share with you. Is we got a little bit of that message yesterday, and I did another meditation today, and specifically asked about that. And yeah, keep it up. It's powerful, and it's having an effect.
What does Mount Shasta say about it, since we're sending it to her?
I had permission to do this. I didn't just pull this out of thin air. There was permission granted before I ever spoke about it to anybody. Not just from the mountain, but higher up the command chain. This was not random. This was a coordinated effort. I'll come back to that. So the key is keep it up. Good things are happening. This is the real deal. The game is on. And I don't mean the superficial, artificial game. I mean the real game. I had one question from Maria I want to answer in just a moment. There's something else. Let me check my notes. I don't very often have to do this.
You need more water?
No, I've got water. That was my tea. I don't remember. Something I just a moment ago I was going to say about all that. Well, let's move on. I'll come back to it if it comes back into my memory banks. Pops back up on my radar screen, I'll pay attention. Maria's question, which is a good question, had to do with what is the shape of the chakras, and she can't remember what the two choices were. She goes, is it this or is it that? And I said, yes, no, maybe, sometimes, and something else. So there. Is that clear for everybody?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. When you go out in nature and you look at anything alive, it's not static. It's constantly changing and moving. And it's never the same. Now, sometimes the movements are long and slow, like watching glaciers move and flow down a mountain. Ice is actually not a real solid. Just like glass is not a solid. It's called a liquid crystal. It flows slowly. You go out and you find 150, 200-year-old windows, and they're thicker at the bottom than they are at the top because over time they've flowed, and you'll see these ripples. Right? Same with a glacier moving down the mountains. Plants, in particular, you see, oh, there's a plant. We draw a picture of the tree. Oh, nice picture, little Johnny. But you come back half hour later, the tree's different. It's not just from the wind blowing. The leaves turn to follow the sun. Flowers will open in the morning, follow the sun, and this happens right out here in our yard. Then the sun, even at like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, the sun goes behind these big trees right here, and they close up. Everything's moving. And the human organism and our energy fields are exactly the same. They move, they change, they're different. So each individual, each one of us, our chakras look one way at one time and a different way even moments later. Our auric fields are constantly growing and shrinking and pulsing and moving. The core of our being, the energetic nature, is a three-dimensional standing wave, a columnar standing wave, very much identical to the concept of a standing wave in most wind instruments, like a pipe organ or a bagpipes or whatever. There's a standing wave in this long tube, right? So we have that moving up and down our organism. And the chakras are these balls of energy that are concentrated in the antinodes. The node is where the waveform crosses, like this. The antinode is that place in between, and that's where our chakras are. So the core inside us at that point is, it's like a ball, but then the chakras moving through us are a two-directional vortex. So coming out the front, if you look at it, it'll look round because there's kind of the ball, but there's also, it opens up like a trumpet. And the same exact thing in the back. So from a side view, it looks kind of like a standing wave, but not quite. So it looks like a ball, it looks like a trumpet, or a cone, or a vortex. And there's also confusion in the literature about this because everybody who has any kind of psychic vision will say, oh, this is what I see. And then the next author comes, no, that's all wrong. This is what I see. And so over time, we've got hundreds of books, all put together and pictures drawn and artwork created by people who have the second sight developed, and they can see auras and they can see chakras, and they've all drawn what they see, and no two look alike. And if I draw your chakras now, and I come back tomorrow and draw them again, they won't look alike. And yet I'm the same person looking. So on the one hand, those books are good. They give us a general idea. But on the practical side, you can't take anything that's drawn of a static nature of something that's a moving, flowing phenomenon and say, this is the way it is. And so there's a lot of misinformation about chakras. And there's one point in particular which has to do with the crown chakra. The crown chakra is sometimes described as a vortex. Well, it's not really a chakra, it's an opening, you're going to hear, because it kind of looks there like a lotus blossom that opens, and that's partially correct. We have this columnar wave, the standing wave tube that goes up through us, and we have 7 main chakras in the body. But that's not the only chakras on our standing wave tube. There's 2 below the body and 3 above the body. The first one below the body is roughly mid-thigh, and the next one is down at the feet. And above the body, the first one is approximately a foot. It's right there. The next one is 1 to 2 feet above that, kind of about where your fingertips are. And the third one is even higher. When people are seeing the lotus and calling this an opening, not a chakra, What they're actually seeing is a structure that has its root just below the chakra, just below crown chakra. I don't remember the Indian name for it, the Indian name. I'm sorry? Hindu name. I've got it in a book. But it's another structure. And then above, so then there's the chakra, and then there's 3 more chakras up above that. So the chakras itself are the same kind of vortex. In fact, you could make a case that the root chakra is in the same situation as this, but you really have to go all the way down to the foot chakra, the ankle chakra, because if you're looking along the tube, it's very much like looking at, one of our other chakras. You see this thing, but you're really seeing kind of like through all of them. So there's no one good answer to what does a chakra look like. The traditional colors of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, those are approximations. Sometimes a heart chakra will look pink, sometimes it will look yellow, sometimes it will look blue. For most people, the strongest of those 3 colors are the blue and the yellow, so it ends up looking green. And so that becomes a color, the heart chakra is green, but the more work you do on self, the pink becomes bigger. Some people see all 3 colors. It's sometimes referred to as a 3-fold flame of the heart. It's actually the 3-fold flame, and like a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch high is how big they are in there. That's what causes your heartbeat. It's that energetic link that on the etheric level manifests as this 3-fold flame, is the connection to the higher planes, your higher bodies. That's what triggers the heartbeat in the right atria. There's an atrial node there, and that's where the heartbeat originates. And when you read a physiology book and a cardiology textbook, they all describe, well, there's this little place there that's electrically different and nobody knows why, because the cells are all identical to all the other cells, but they don't work the same. And so the source of the heartbeat is a mystery in medicine to this very moment. But when you talk to esotericists who have studied the energy of the body, they go, oh, well, you see that thing right there? You turn on your astral vision, you see that right there? That's what causes the heart to beat. That's just an example of how there's different colors and there's different aspects of how our energy interacts with our physical body. Question.
Does Chinese medicine have an explanation for the heartbeat?
No, because I mean the explanation is that when your source chi is depleted, you die. You're born with a certain amount of chi from your source chi, and then you replenish part of that from your from food and air. And when that source chi depletes, you die. The one part of the theory says, there's no way to replenish that source chi. But the older stuff says, no. There's this whole list of herbs. There's a whole list of energetic Qigong techniques. The older, much older Taoist Qigong methods do replenish that. And in my book, which will be coming out by the end of the year, one way or another, if I don't have a publisher who's willing to take it on, it's going to get self-published because it needs to get out. I have a section on longevity. And I talk a lot about evidence, both empirical evidence and actual documented evidence of how long people live. And there was one of the ancient Chinese guys who lived to be 256 years old. Li Qingyan was his name. there was a letter from the Chinese government on his 150th birthday, congratulating him. There was another letter on his 200th birthday, congratulating him. Apparently the government had shifted and there was a lot of turmoil. This is right in the time there's a lot of civil war going on just before World War II. Li Ching-yen died in 1933 and at the age of 256. So because I believe, probably because of that political turmoil, he didn't get the letter congratulating him on his 250th birthday. He got gypped out of his 250-year letter. We have a photograph of him taken about 2 years before he died. I think it was 1931, which ironically is the year my father was born. And he's sitting there, upright, wearing his clothes. He was bald, but he had a little hat on. And he was a Chinese herbalist. He hiked around the mountains harvesting herbs. That's what he did all his life. He practiced some very specific Qigong exercises, which we have. He claims to have met an old hermit in the mountains who at the time he met him was more than 500 years old. And Li Qing met him when Li Qing was about 100 or so. He taught him this stuff and then he lived another 156 years. And he claimed the old guy was 500. Why would he lie? He could have said 200 and everybody would have been impressed, right? So longevity in the human form is very different than what we have been taught. So this concept of source chi not being able to replenish is false. It can be replenished. What? Your dog. You don't have opposable thumbs. Sit. Yeah. See? Yeah. Okay. Give me. Yeah. Good. Good. Shake hands. Great. Great. So anyway, kind of a segue off talking about chakras and energy, but it's actually a good kind of a segue in a way. This is all, by the way, very, very much in keeping with traditional Toltec philosophy, that health is a key important element of our culture, right? We've talked about that before. The food and the farming, the health, the education, and social order. So everything we've talked about tonight, we've had examples of where those concepts are not being followed. If we want a better society, we could do a lot worse than go back to this Toltec model. In my book, when I'm talking about longevity, I did a lot of research that looked at Weston Price's work and the major cultures he studied around the world. I look at several other cultures he did not study all around the world. What's the documented evidence as far as real ages versus oral tradition? The Hunza Valley in what is now Pakistan, up in the Himalayas, was reputed to be a site of very long live people. There's some speculation that was the culture that James Hilton based the novel not Shangri-La, Lost Horizon on. which was set in this mythical place up in the Himalayas where everybody lived a really long time. So we know that the people there were living a long time before Western culture arrived. We also know that they didn't keep any written records, so there was no proof, quote unquote, of how old they really were. The former Soviet Republic of Georgia, which is now back to being its own country, had a similar reputation, but again, no written records. Is there a question?
Can you tell through DNA how old somebody was when they died?
No.
Okay.
With one exception, possibly. It has to do with cell division. And when our genes are dividing, there's a cap on the end of the DNA gene structure called a telomere.
I have this lecture once.
And it looks like and functions exactly like the little hard plastic thing on the end of your shoelaces. And so every time you lace up your shoes, little bits of that little plastic thing break off and break off and break off, and eventually the shoelace cap falls away, and then your shoelace itself starts to unravel. So in cell division, the telomere basically functions to protect the gene. But every time a cell divides, a little bit is broken off in the process. And eventually, once that telomere cap is gone, the DNA starts to unravel. It does not replicate properly, and then you start to get abnormal function of cells, abnormal looking cells, mutations, and then that's a precursor to things like cancer and death. So, in theory, you might be able to look at the aggregate of the cells and look at the telomere length and say, here's how old the person is. That probably only works if they don't know what I know and what Li Qingyan knew and what everybody who reads my book is going to know, which is that if you do certain things, you activate an enzyme called telomerase, which extends the length of the telomeres. You understand what that means? Okay. If the telomere shrinks every time a cell divides, and when you run out of telomere, that's basically that starts the death cycle and you die. If you extend the length of the telomere, you extend the number of times a cell can divide before the telomeres wear out. And if you continuously keep doing that, in theory, you no longer have to worry about death. That's a purely physical DNA-based look at longevity in life, however. We're here on a divine purpose called our true will. When you finish your true will, you get to leave and go someplace better. The key is you have to do the work to find your true will and then accomplish it. So keeping your body healthy as possible, extending those telomeres. You know, we know that without the telomerase enzyme, the human body is designed to live on average between 120 up to 150 years. Everybody's different. There's some variation there in what our theoretical maximum lifespan can be. But then we see guys like Li Qingyan that we have documented evidence that he lived to be 256. And it's not just these exotic places in the Himalaya Mountains. We have evidence of, what was the guy's name in England? He's in my book. He lived to be about 157. He buried, over his lifetime, he lived through 8 different kings in England.
Wow.
Anyway, we have evidence that that's happening. It's not too, like if you start young and so Li Qing had a specific diet. He did Chinese herbs, and he did this energy qigong. And the herbs have a traditional role of, they were called longevity herbs. They're also qi tonic herbs. And there was one called golden root, and Chinese emperors would pay for that herb equal to its weight in gold. They valued it that highly. So we know all this. There's no reason for us not to be following this. So if you can double your lifespan or triple your lifespan in perfect health, that gives you more time to do your true will. And if we can get a whole population focused on their true will instead of division and polarity that's being artificially imposed upon them and impressed upon them with television programming, brainwave, reprogramming your brainwave frequencies, and that sort of thing. This is all a required part of creating the kind of world we wished we had been born into. What we all need to buy, especially anybody following the Toltec path, needs to realize is, okay, this was here once. Society kind of fell. They lost the formula. Now we need to bring it back. That's what we're here for. It's not to live in and enjoy the kind of world that we wished we'd been born into. It's to create the kind of world we wish we'd been born into. That is the Toltec work. And the first step is you've got to be able to get to your place of power. You need to practice all these techniques we've taught. You need to use your Akadua. You need to have an intent for everything you do. You need to put your attention, learn to hold your attention, learn to use higher and higher and higher levels of energy. We're trying to create an Akadua symphony. I don't like the word army. It's a symphony of energy workers, and we're all going to be different, just like the musical instruments in a full symphony orchestra. Every stringed instrument, every wind instrument, every brass instrument, all the cool, weird percussion stuff, and they're playing this marvelous symphony, right? Has anyone ever been to go hear an orchestra concert? Or you've been to like a show, like an opera, where they have an orchestra down in the orchestra pit, but they're doing something else, right? When you first get there, and you're being seated, and everybody's coming in, what's the orchestra doing?
Warming up.
And what's it? They're practicing and warming up, and what does that sound like?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Chaos. Random chaos.
Uh-huh.
And what happens when the conductor walks in
Goes.
and goes,
Everybody gets quiet.
instant silence, and then he goes, dun 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 dun. Ein klein Nachtmusik, one of my favorite Mozart pieces, and I can't sing worth a darn, so I'll stop. I don't want to annoy Smokey. That is what we need to do with our Akadua, with our intent, with our knowledge of this holistic Toltec philosophy, with the ability to talk people down from their divisive polarity. Trump is a puppet.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody on the other side are puppets. Pay them no attention. Hold the thought in your mind, the world we want to create. Use our Akadua like a symphony orchestra was when we're all ready to start playing that orchestral symphony. Mozart's good. Beethoven was good. Question.
Oh, just a comment. I've been thinking, throughout the discussion tonight that a lot of what you've been talking about is the stalker skills, that we need to be aware, but a stalker doesn't like run out and start like freaking out or doing stuff. But also at the same time, we're using our dreamer skills to put out this vision. And so all of that requires our warrior skill of doing.
There will come a time in the not too distant future when the conductor is going to tap his baton on his music stand, and it will be time to do. And you're right. This is the time for the dreamer and the stalker. And learning to read between the lines and see that whole chessboard. And we're going to be talking more about chess. We're actually going to have a chess tournament.
You're not in the tournament, are you?
Yeah, of course I am. But I'm going to be playing everybody all at once. So let's get back to the energy. The higher up the Akadua levels you go, the better able to influence this human collective consciousness, the stronger you are at doing that. The higher up we all get, the better and more effective we are as a Toltec party, as an orchestra, at playing our symphony of creating a new world. A lot of you who are the formal students are now level 3s. You will be more effective if you move on to level 4. I have a date for the level 4 class. I'm going to be emailing you either tonight or first thing in the morning. I'm going to be emailing you the notice, or the announcement, I think we're calling it, for the Akadua level 4 class. It's an intensive. It lasts 1 week long, and it's called the diaphanous shell. That diaphanous shell is one of your energy structures that has to be fully developed in order to hold the level 4 and to do that work. And that's described in the handout we have for you. You'll get it as a PDF. The dates are January 19th through January 25th. And that's going to be here in Mount Shasta. We have a space reserved. It's not here, we just don't have enough lodging here yet. So it's another small retreat center operated by another shaman that I know in the area. And it's called an intensive because it is intense. And I don't mean in tents. You won't be sleeping in tents in the middle of the winter. It's intense because it's extreme. It is a week long. We go from a Saturday morning to a Friday afternoon, Friday noonish or thereabouts. You do get to sleep, at least your body gets to sleep, but you don't. The work will go on 24/7. You'll do work in the dreaming, and we'll do work in the waking. And by the end of the week, you'll realize there is no difference. This is an opportunity to move up your proficiencies, your abilities, etc. And so it's a week long. It includes all the lodging, the food, the snacks. There will be snacks, not just, dried saltines. Sometimes we put ketchup on the dried saltines. Now Bonnie's in charge of the food. You're okay. With me, like I say, when I'm cooking, nobody dies of starvation. But when Bonnie cooks, everybody's happy. There will be some discounts for early registration. There will be discounts if you're one of the first 10 to sign up. January will be my 10th anniversary of finding the Acadua and Coyote and starting my Toltec path. So in honor of that anniversary, the first 10 who sign up get a really hefty discount. And so I encourage you to be one of the first 10. I'm going to be offering that option to be one of the first 10 to the students first. And then opening it up to all the other level 3s. We've had 2 to 3 dozen level 3s we've produced over the years. 2 or 3 of them have actually gone on and gotten a level 4 from Coyote in the past. So there's still a lot more up here. So I encourage you to register early, and that will be your next opportunity to get a level 4. And with that level 4, the type of work we will be doing as a group is going to be kicked up a notch. The time is now to kick things up. Questions?
About the level 4 or in general?
Anything. Level 4.
We have one unidentified viewer, otherwise everyone's students. I thought you might want to tell them, the students, to mark your calendars for December 1st, which is a Saturday evening, for a special event.
Yeah, I'll give you details later. Thank you for that reminder. Saturday, December 1st, in the evening, there's a special event. I'm not going to tell you right now what that event is.
Can you tell us the time?
No, not yet. It'll be sometime in the late afternoonish, and it'll go late. That's all I can tell you.
Well, we will be sending out kind of just, especially for students, but an updated calendar for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Shortly.
With a very large grain of salt. Take that calendar update with a very large grain of salt, because it'll be about the 4th or 5th attempt at a calendar that we've put out this year. And have we had anything actually go off as planned? Maybe 2 events all year. We're into the 9th month. We've been doing 1 to 2 events
You are, Sean.
a year. And we've actually had one to 2 events per month other than the Monday discussions. And we've actually had 2 go off as scheduled. That's it.
Neither fire, nor snow, nor flood, nor rain.
I want to share this.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Oh, so if there's no more questions.
Oh, yeah, one question. Maria wants to know what was that shift that you mentioned on Facebook?
Thank you, Maria. That was the thing that I was trying to remember to talk about.
All right, Maria.
Okay. Hold that thought, Maria. And we're going to see Yvonne's latest artwork, which I'm very excited to see. I'm hoping the fact that she brought it back means that it's done. And you'll take it over in front of Bonnie. Walk around this way.
Am I going to shift cameras?
Yeah, you're going to shift cameras. And hold it like right
Put
beside.
it in front of my face. Oh, wow.
Yep.
After I get to see it. Cool. Now show put.
Put it in front of her face because the camera is here.
Yeah, turn around.
No. Here's the
That's
camera.
The camera over
No.
there.
Back up.
Oh wow, look at that. Spider Woman.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
You're getting better. This is incredible. I think I've been there.
Oh wow.
That looks familiar.
It's, I don't know if you ever got my text, but the first time I did the pogging, these things were coming out of the one eye, and the one eye was looking back and forth.
Yeah. I saw that, yeah. Oh, this is good. Now, are you getting set up to sell these prints online? Because I think when Coyote got that, I think there's going to be some interest down there for some of your Akadwa artwork to sell it. I mean, this is good. This is good stuff.
Even like postcards or greeting cards.
From postcard size up to this size, and maybe one size in between. Oh, this is.
Thank you. And what this is that this represents, like, when my mother's in my grandmother, my eggs are already in grandmother.
Right, that's DNA. I
Right,
recognize
it's
that.
a DNA strand.
Yvonne, take one step this direction.
You should see the mat.
And turn it so it's perpendicular
Yeah, there
to
we
this.
go. Perfect.
Wow.
And the mat's even decorated. It looks even more three-dimensional.
Maria says, gorgeous Yvonne. And Cherie says, I dreamed that image last night. Good job, Yvonne.
Oh, that's crazy.
No, it's not. This is expected.
Did you have another one that you wanted to show? Or was that
No, that's just it.
Okay. Well,
I am in awe.
Thank you.
And I have so much respect for people who can do that.
And I was really channeling the Kiowa, and I knew the Toltecs were there with me, and
That's good.
they were over it.
That is so good.
Thank you.
That makes me happy to see that. Okay, the shift. You'll understand this. Those of you who go through this level 4 intensive will understand what I'm about to say better after you go through the intensive. But I will try to explain it. Imagine a tube. It is your lifetime. And it's not just you, it's the world. The world is traveling through a tube of time. And quantum physics tells us that everything out in the future is a potential. It's this amorphous waveform. It's shapeless. It's simultaneously everywhere, and we haven't picked this path or this path. You know, it's like that Robert Frost poem, which is my favorite poem of all time, which is one of the guiding principles of my life, called The Road Not Taken. You know, the two roads diverged in the yellow wood. And I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So until you get up to that point and actually choose one or the other, the waveform is full of all potentials. If we do nothing, we're traveling down this tube, and you can learn techniques to look ahead a certain distance. There have been a lot of people, not just in this plane, but the ancestors, the grandfathers, those on the dwellers on the higher unseen planes, who've been working for eons to guide humanity in a particular direction. And the direction the world's time tube was moving was not good. Last Wednesday, through the work of a lot of people and the small efforts that this group participates in, help to a certain extent, we shifted the direction of that time tube that we were in. The world changed course, hopefully into a better direction. This took place, and I sensed it at the time it was happening, but I did not understand it. But shortly after that, E.J. Gold, who's got a lot more experience than I do, informed his people. We're on the list, we got the message. And Coyote has confirmed it as well, that yeah, that's what happened. Now that I've been through one of these, I'll be able to recognize it in the future. And quite frankly, Toltec groups everywhere are part of what's morphing it in this direction or that direction to help the advancement of humanity. This is a small, subtle thing. The time frame that it took place was between roughly 12:15 p.m. Pacific time, just afternoon, until about 3 p.m. Pacific time. That was the block of time. And EJ said about 3-ish. That's when it locked into place. It was a small process. It wasn't just a hard event. It wasn't really like a quantum leap. It was a kind of a process. And interesting things can happen in this process. And you know, I actually have on my body physical scars I obtained because I was trying to walk through walls and furniture because the time tube was shifting. And I thought, wait a minute. And all of a sudden things weren't where I thought they were. So yeah, I have scars from this. Being a shaman isn't easy. You had a question over here.
I'm gonna share my experience. So he gave his experience of going down the mountain on Wednesday and seeing that fire. And there was things shifting before that. That's when he fell and hurt himself. And at one point he was ready to go, but he didn't go. And then all of a sudden he says, okay, I'm leaving. And then had he left 10 minutes earlier, he wouldn't have seen the fire and wouldn't have been the one that called it in, and may have got stuck down in Redding longer because he wouldn't have known what was going on. If he left 10 minutes later, he would have been caught right in the middle of the fire. So the timing is crucial. And we were already clocking these little minute shifts that were going on. And when EJ posted that there had been a shift at 3 p.m. that day, he was still down in Redding and we hadn't even talked. So everything he just explained was his perception. My perception at home was I was seeing all these things adding up. And what I've noticed since then is that I think we ended up in a better reality because there's several things that have been, you know, contentious. Even this fire that was coming directly at us at that moment was very shortly after that shifted in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And then there was, you know, people and situations that are normally contentious or, you know, are usually a problem. And it was like, oh, well, that went smoothly, you know. So things that we're used to seeing happen a certain way seem to have been diffused a little bit or softened or shifted slightly. And those were just my impressions about what that looks like on a daily kind of basis.
So yeah, that's what I was alluding to. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I knew something was going on Wednesday and couldn't figure out why. It was like I was walking through different Tauruses.
Mm-hmm. You only think that because you were walking through different Tauruses. Okay, any other questions?
Hold on. So Cherie also said you sent me reaching for my journal, and I recorded this last Wednesday. She wrote, "I feel odd," and that was about just after that shift happened. So yeah.
Let's see.
The
I want to see what day my client passed away. It might have been Wednesday.
Oh wow, one of your clients went.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, any last questions?
all right.
Going once, going twice. Thank
Okay.
you, everyone.
Yeah, let's go offline.
Well done.